Hey there YouTube, AJ here, and in this video I build this shrinker stretcher stand that you see in front of me here. But it's a really long video, so I understand if you don't want to watch the whole thing. I'm going to put a timestamp right here. If you go to this timestamp in the video, I'll have a summary of this, what all this entailed. And if you just watch the summary, you know, like it'll be like maybe 4 or 5 minutes, then you can decide if you want to go back and actually watch the rest of it. But in general, this is my idea on how to make a really compact shrinker stretcher stand, because I got a really small garage and I made it for only $5 out of my pocket because I had most of the parts and pieces and recycled all kinds of steel and stuff. So anyway, either go to that timestamp and watch the summary, or keep on playing and watch the entire video. Either way, I'm happy. Thank you, and I'll see you later. Here's our normally scheduled intro. Hey there YouTube, AJ here, and I got a really good deal on a set of Kastforce KF5005 shrinker stretchers. Found these on eBay. They weren't that far away, and I got them for more than half off, including shipping. And the seller said they only used them once, and I believe it. They're like untouched, so they're in really good shape. However, I don't want to mount these in my vise and have to use these one-handed. I want to be able to put them on a stand and have a foot pedal operate them, so I can use 2 hands to hold the pieces I'm using it on. And I need these very quickly because of what I'm working on the hot rod. So I need to get a stand made up for them. I don't need these handles. I guess I could cut them down, but I am going to save them and not cut them down. Instead, I'm going to make my own handles out of this chunk of rebar. What I have here is a Harbor Freight bench grinder stand that I don't really use as a bench grinder stand, so I figure since I got a stand already made, why start from complete scratch and make a stand? But what I do want to do is make a compact stand, because as you've seen in my garage, I've got very, very little space. So I want to try to minimize the area this thing takes up. Now, I would use this cast iron's top, but it would be bigger than I want it to be. So we're not going to use this piece. Likewise, the water bucket and holder, I'm not going to need that. And it's just going to be in the way, so that's going to go away too. Now we're left with just the pole and the base. I have a chunk of odd shaped 3/16 thick steel that is that I can get the right size I need out of it for the top. Put them here. I'm actually going to put, you'll see, I'm going to put one here, one about here, cut away all this weird stuff so I have room for my actuator rods. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it's thick enough. If not, I'll have to add some gussets to it. I kind of think I'm going to have to add gussets anyway, and plus I need to make some way to mount it on here. I guess I could weld it straight to the tube though. So maybe, we'll see how that goes. Then for my actuator rods, I actually have some smaller pieces of rebar. They're bent, so I got to kind of straighten them, but we're going to make do with that. I got these 2 springs that I salvaged out of a dishwasher that you're going to see in another video. And anyway, those are going to be my pedal return springs. And then my pedals themselves, I've got these legs that came out of a, that used to be like a sawhorse. So I'm going to cut these up, and the idea is I'm going to have 2 shorter. It'll be shorter than this, but basically I'm going to have pieces like that on each side to be my pedals. So what's going to make my stand different than others is I'm planning to try to do like a rocker pedal setup where the same set of pedals actuates both the shrinker and the stretcher. I don't know if this is going to work or not. It's the idea I had. I kind of drew it up on a piece of paper, and I think I can make it work. So let's get to it and see if we can. Let's start prepping some of this material. Okay, so that will be one side of our rocker pedal actuator thing. There'll be one on each side of the pole. So once we weld all this together, clean it up, and then there will be a piece that goes between these to act as a foot bar, and I'll make that out of rebar, but I don't know how long it needs to be yet. So once I get there, I'll cut that out of rebar and weld that in. So now let's look at our platform that we want to mount these on. I think one of these is going to go here and the other way. Now we do need to make sure between our levers that we have enough room that the actuator rod can pass by on the outside of the main support tube. Move this over so we get a good 3 inches in between the edge of the jaw. That'll give us plenty of room in the center. The leading edge of these is rounded off, so I'm not going to have the plate come out clear out to that edge. I'm going to put it back to where it goes flat. So go ahead and mark out where these are going to sit. Now the handles, they don't fit in here yet. I've got to get rid of the bumps on the edges of this, then they'll fit in. But once these go in, I'll be welding a tab on the back side of this handle underneath here for the actuator rod to go down to the foot pedals. That said, I have to have room for this to go by, so pretty much need to get rid of all this steel over here and here. All right, some circle templates. Got a worn disc and a brand new disc. No, that's wrong. Shoot. All right, I don't know if you can see what I'm trying to do here, but this is the block where one shrinker stretcher will sit. Here's the other one. So one will sit here, one will sit here, and then hopefully somehow I can follow these curves from here in and around to there to cut these out. Same thing on this side, in, around to there. That will leave us with this piece to mount on the pole, and yeah, that's probably going to be pretty flimsy, but I need a relief here for my actuating rod to go through. That's what we're going to go with. We're going to try it. If I screw it up and need a new plate, eh. Okay, as you can see, I didn't try to do that curly Q thing. Right as I started cutting, I thought it would be easier to just cut it straight, and then we'll come back and cut that in later. And then I thought, you know what, let's just make sure maybe we won't need to do that. Maybe I can just get away with maybe a little more filing here, or not at all. Maybe I'll have enough room to clear as is, and it'd just be a lot easier to cut. So the idea is now that this will go on here, and these guys will go on here. It's getting late, time for dinner, so I think I'm gonna have to call that, but I made pretty good progress. Haven't been out here that long. So these legs that I'm gonna be using, if you can see it, one side has like a divot to where they would mesh together, so the steel's not flat here, and then so that means it won't line up when I go to weld it. So to make it line up, I got to smash that flat. I've already done it on these through various trial and error methods. What I found worked was just to stack up steel in between. And once those are wedged in there, very simple, very easy. Now they'll line up together to where I can weld them. So these pieces of rebar that I'm going to be using for my handle in the shrinkers and stretchers, I need to turn the end of it down a little bit to the same size as the handle, which basically just means getting rid of the ridges on the outside of the rebar. So I'm going to have to grind that off so they'll fit in here. All right, got our depth marked, so we need to clean those off. Okay, well, now we have shortened handles that'll fit in here, and I have to weld a tab to each of these to use my actuator rod to pull it down. This is going to be my foot pedal, like that, tied together at the ends here, pivot through here. Now, because my pivot point is right on the seam and the welds here, you know, I'm going to have to drill this for an axle to go through it. I'm going to take these heavy duty washers and I'm going to weld them onto pedal, what do you call it, on both sides here, and then drill out the center, and that way this will be reinforced where I'll be putting pressure against it. Make sense? Hope so. Well, that's going to be our pedal assembly. I'm using a leftover piece of tie rod. This is a Model A tie rod that I cut down to make my adjustable drag link for my steering. So I had this little piece left over. That's going to be my axle. So that's going to go through the pedals, and this will get welded to this to make these go together. So going through my post, because I don't want to just run on this, I don't want to have this right on the metal, because that post is thin, so it's going to stretch out and deform. So I'm going to weld this into the post going through it as a sleeve, that this will go through and rotate within it. Now it's a little oversized, but I got an idea for that. What do we want to do next? I guess I should start preparing my post with this. Again, that's the next step. I also didn't want to put this through the post and weld this right to the post, because both these are pretty thin. So I got these big washers that I'll bend to the contour of the post. Weld this to the post, so that'll give this more support and more beef. And then that'll be between that. This will run through both bars, through there, and yeah. But I want to orient this to where the pedals are opposite this leg over here and these two legs here, I think that'll give it the most stability. And then I just gotta make sure this is up high enough to clear this collar of the base. Okay, center this up here. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. Okay. Doesn't matter if this is a little off here, because with my washers I can kind of straighten it up. In fact, I'll probably weld on my washer before I finish drilling that hole out. So I guess we need to try to bend these washers. That's going to be fun because these are thick. Thick! Let's see what we can do.
Make sure we keep our pins opposite each other.
All right, still rocking. We need to go a little more.
Whip lock. Might have been too much. Okay.
Oh, that's not bad. It does need just a little more.
Alright.
Let's see what we got. All right, that one's definitely weldable. Okay. We're ready to fire up the welder again. Okay, well, I did some work and didn't realize my battery had died on the camera. I do that a lot, but you know, what I did was I went ahead and welded my pivot shaft into one leg. I also welded a cap on this end of the tube. I drilled a hole in here and chamfered that, and drilled a hole in here in the end of the cap, and I need to drill this out to the right size and then tap it, because I'm going to put a grease zerk in there, and that way I'll be able to squirt grease into this so it won't bind up. So now you're caught up on what all I did. I went and just checked the threads on my grease fitting, and they are 1/4 28, which requires a 7/32 hole for that tap. Now we need to tap it.
Alright, let's see if we can do it with this handle. I hate these handles, but we'll try. Okay.
Okay, so now if I got everything right, which is a distinct possibility I didn't, but this should thread in. Come on, baby, don't let me down. Don't let me down. Come on now. There we go. Okay, so now in theory I should be able to put my grease gun on this, pump this thing full of grease. Grease will come out this hole and lubricate the tube there. And I'm still gonna do some kind of bushing. I got an idea for that. Now this is where my idea for a wear surface. Ideally, I'd have like a little bronze bearing or bushing to go in here, but I didn't feel like running and trying to find one, and it's going to be pretty thin anyway, and I don't have any thin brass or anything I could put in there. So what I did come up with though, a bunch of zip ties. Nylon actually makes a pretty good bearing material, or not bearing, but you know, bushing, whatever. Anyway, so my thought is I take these zip ties, place them in like so. Oop, wrong way. Cut off the excess, and I'd have a way to kind of, oops, you know what, before we go too far, back this up. We almost forgot something. Almost forgot to put my washer in. I would have not been happy with myself had I forgot that. Okay, so the idea is, we're going to take this and go all the way around, because this is almost the perfect thickness. Okay, and now you can see this is much tighter in the inner pipe, or outer pipe. So that is going to be our bearing surface. And once I cut off the heads of this, I think I can get in some more. Go ahead and cut off the excess. I'm sure this is great on my knife. Oops! Oh, that was almost painful. Alright. Now, I left the heads on this end so I could push this together without them pushing out. So now that that's in there, we don't need these anymore. So now we gotta cut those off. Now, we can take and fill in the slots with some pieces from the other one and get it completely filled in. And I think once I get grease put in there, I think these will make a pretty good bearing surface or wear surface. All right, that's pretty good. All right, we're packed in there. Oh, look at that. That moves smooth. Tell me that wasn't a good plan. Now I'm ready to weld this one to the shaft. However, before I do that, I want to make sure they're perfectly mated to one another. Well, that should ensure at least one side is square.
Let's see.
7.5. There we go. All right, now that these are square to one another, it's time to weld this to this, and then we cut that off. This is all, the rocker assembly is all in place. Works really well. Now it's time to put my foot bar on here, which I'm just going to use this, I don't know what size this is, like 3/4 inch, maybe smaller, I don't know. It's rebar basically, heavy rebar. We've got our foot bars welded in. Everything is in place, working the way I imagined. With the bottom end pretty much buttoned up. You know, we got to make our attachments for our rods and things, but now it's time to turn our attention to the top. Okay, I'm almost out of welding wire, so I'm going to go ahead and start working on my top plate here. But I'm just going to tack everything in place for now and try to get everything to where I can just final weld it later. What I want to do, I laid out a grid on the bottom of it so I can help me center it on my post. Once I have it tacked onto my post, I want to reinforce this. I'm basically going to put steel around the edges and across here to help keep it from bending. Because this is only 3/16" steel, so I am a little worried about this being too weak out here. But if I take steel and weld it around the outside edge like that, that will help it resist the bending force. It'll give it more rigidity going from this way. Well, as expected, I ran out of MIG wire. I barely got this tacked. I only got one tacked on this piece here. I don't know if you can see in the time lapse, but I used flat bar, plate to make my edges around here. That's because I got something I want to mount to this. So I wanted to have I'm going to be able to drill and tap this for a bolt on each side here and then on the back side. Same thing on this end. So we'll get to that later. But here in the middle, I just used a piece of small rebar on both sides. I'm going to fully weld that in to give this strength. I think that'll give it plenty of strength all the way around once it's all welded up. But now I'm stuck because I can't weld anything. So I think what I'll start doing now is making my tabs for the end of this handle to attach my actuator rods. So I got a few scraps of 3/16 laying around yet, so I'll make something to weld onto that and onto that one. And the other thing I can do, and I think I might do that first, is I need to drill holes in the tabletop itself so I can run bolts through to mount my actual shrinker and stretchers. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is lay out a piece of tape just so it's easier to see my marks.
Come 7/8 in from our edge.
These actually laid out, and once I drilled them, they fit perfectly, so we're good there. Now, what we're thinking here is putting a rod in like that to a tab on here, and this will pull it down like so. So I think what I'll do is make my tab just kind of come straight off here with the hole in it. I think I'm gonna have to block your view for a moment. All right, I think that's what we're gonna shoot for. Got my tabs roughed out. Gonna go on like that. Can't weld them until the Amazon guy comes with my welding wire. I think what I'm going to use to attach this in the rod, I'm going to try this. I don't know if it'll work or not, but this is a brake transfer rod off a Model A. I'm going to use this, but I'm not going to be using these clevises at the end. So I'm going to take two of these clevises off. I'm going to try to weld them to the end of the rebar and use those for my connector. I got welding wire. I finished welding all this up around the outside edges. It's good and sturdy now. I got hardware to attach things. Welded on my tabs onto my actuator rods, and I welded the clevises on as well. Oh yeah, the other thing I did, I started worrying about how this pole was only being held in place by 3 bolts around this collar at the bottom, and how I thought the pressure may work it to where it could be loose. So I ended up on this side, I made a single tab, welded the tab to the pole, and then tight here I used a jam nut onto this bolt. Well, not really a jam nut. I didn't have any 3/8 jam nuts, so I took regular 3/8 nuts and I cut them in half. So, and then I used those as jam nuts. On the other side, I had to get a little more creative since the bolts are like off to the side here. And so I made this U-shaped bracket. Did the same thing with the quote-unquote jam nuts and welded it to the pole here. So now she's good and steady. It's really, really solid now. So real happy with that. Still pretty happy with how compact it is. And so we're gonna go ahead and throw these back on for now. And once these are on and snug down, I will start fitting my rods. Well, I hit a snafu I gotta figure out. My original idea, I would attach my spring to the rod and somewhere up here, and that would return the pedal to its position once it's pressed down. For that to work, the other rod, I thought the pedal would just slide up and not activate it. It would only activate it on the downstroke, and then the spring would be what kept it, return it to the up position. However, the pedal is binding. It's not working. I got to figure out something there. Okay, well, last night while brushing my teeth, I had an idea of how I was going to fix my problem of the rods binding. And when I came out to start kind of laying that out, I realized I was using my rods on the wrong side. If I had attached this rod to this leg, when I step on this pedal, the rod comes down, and I'm on the wrong side of the tool because the tool's over here, not this one. So the rods actually need to do a little thing like that. My solution still works, but I just got to make sure I put it in the right place now. So basically what I'm going to do is put a slot in the leg so that as the leg goes up, this rod won't bind on the leg itself. The slot will be like an oval hole for it. But the leg itself isn't thick enough for that. I'm pretty sure that it would just eventually just tear the metal out. So I'm going to take another piece of 3/16 inch steel and weld that in to the back side, and then put my slot through both the leg and the backing steel. I've got everything in place here. I drilled a little hole here for my return springs. So the last thing I have to do is thread the end of this for a washer and nut, and then somehow rig an attachment point on my spring, on the rod itself, so it'll pull it back up. Maybe a little, the die may be just a little small. Well, that wasn't easy. I'm not looking forward to doing the other one. Well, I got this one tapped, or yeah, tapped, die, threaded. I got this one threaded, but broke my die wrench doing it. Broke it right out of the body. That's how hard this thing was fighting me. The last thing we need to do is figure out where we want these. suppose I could test it at this point, but what's the fun in that? I say for testing, we take it apart, we clean it up, we pretty it up, and then test it and see how. Okay, she's all done, and I gotta say, damn. Harbor Freight, look out. I might be coming for your customer base. I think it looks really good. Looks don't matter though if it don't work, but we'll get to that. First, let's go through a summary of the project. Started off with a old Harbor Freight bench grinder stand in the center and the base. I modified that, welded on these plates to tie into the bolts down here to make it more stable. The pedal came from metal sawhorses I literally picked up at a Curb Alert, got them for free off the road. And the down to, oh man, it's got skin. How'd we do that? The axle that the whole pedal assembly pivots on is made out of a Model A tie rod piece. Then there is a sleeve of conduit through the down post that rides in. I made a bearing surface in there out of zip ties, nylon zip ties. Back here I put a Zerk fitting in the end of that axle, and I actually was able to grease the entire assembly because I drilled a hole in the axle as well, so the grease would come out inside of the conduit sleeve. Our foot bar here is made out of rebar, same here, and heavy rebar up here for these handles. Welded on tabs for the handles. Smaller rebar runs down to my pedal assembly to actuate the actual shrinker stretcher. The springs that act as a return for my pedal, those came out of a dishwasher. They used to actually hold the door. Almost everything in here was free. Oh yeah, I used some 1/4 inch all thread here to make a fence that I tapped into here, so I loosened these bolts, and then I can set a fence for how far in I want to take my metal. Basically all the materials I either had lying around or I scrounged off somewhere for free. The rebar all came out of a construction project, throwaway stuff, so that was all free. Basically, I got about $5 worth of hardware in this, plus paint, which the paint I already had too. So this whole thing cost me $5. None of that matters though if it doesn't work. So that said, if I step on the pedal, this actuates. There's an oval hole that allows this rod to not actuate the other jaw completely. And you can see, like so. Will say one thing about my actual shrinker stretchers. These are Kastforce KF5005 shrinker stretchers. They are a little more expensive than the Harbor Freight ones you can get, but the Harbor Freight ones only have like an inch throat, where these have 2 1/4 or 2 3/8 inch throat. So you can do a much deeper flange on these, which I like. I think the price difference is like $30, not on sale, etc. So I would definitely want the Kastforce over the Harbor Freight ones, just for that throat depth alone. However, these also have a bolt here in the bottom of the handle that you can adjust in and out and set the depth of how far the throw is on the lever. So if you're only wanting to shrink partially, you can set that depth and do less stretching or shrinking and make that repeatable every time on your piece, so you can get much more precise. Same reason I put on these fences that I made. You're supposed to only like engage like half of the metal for optimized work. And if you set, like if you have a 2-inch piece and you only want it to go in 1 inch, you can loosen these bolts, pivot the guide forward, and set it to the depth that you need for whatever piece you're working on. All that adds up to more precision in your metal work. However, you know, over time you probably wouldn't need that. You'd probably be able to eyeball it pretty good yourself. Same thing with getting a feel for how the pedal works. But hey, let's see how it does work. Alright, it's definitely shrinking. This piece has powder coating on it, and you can see where it's peeling off the powder coating, so it's slipping a little bit. I don't think it's the best. Probably would work a lot better if you were gripping straight to the metal, but it is working, so happy there. All right, the other way. Good. Wants to rock this way, so I'm probably going to put a cross piece in here, something to make this a little more stable. So first problem, that side works really well because you have the legs sticking straight out. I got 3 legs here. I think what I'll do is get a base to put this on to give it a little more stability, but it'll work for now. It is definitely working. You can see where I stretched it on this side and shrunk it here, created this S pattern. Again, the 2 problems so far. One, my piece has this powder coating on it. That's making it not work so well. No big deal though. Proof of concept is work. It needs a little refinement. So not perfect. What do you expect for $5, right? Hey, but it does get me working on my car now. I am halfway through on a video where I'm putting some supporting materials inside the front half of my hot rod. I just think it's going to make my life a lot easier going forward, having this available to do the sheet metal work. So if you watched the whole video, thank you very much. I know it's going to be a long video. If you watched the summary, I appreciate that. That's great. I'm going to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this video saying, hey, go to this timestamp and just watch the summary first and see if you want to go back and see how I actually built this thing and my thought process and whatever. So that said, I guess I'll see you next time when I'm working on my hot rod again, or maybe I'll be skateboarding again because I got to get back to skateboarding too. Anyway, until then, YouTube, later.